The rebellion's fire had burned too long. The Zareth Empire could not ignore it any longer. Whole sectors whispered Elias Kale's name as if it were a war cry, and every victory drew more ships to his side. But every uprising also bled the Empire, and War Chief Velara would not allow weakness to spread. She gathered her fleets, the largest concentration of Zareth war power in a century. Flagships bristling with cannons, cruisers armored like fortresses, swarms of fighters that blackened the stars. At their center sailed her personal dreadnought, Bloodfang, a ship that had ended worlds. Velara stood upon its command deck, her golden eyes fixed on the star charts. "No more shadows," she growled. "We end him today." The battlefield. Chosen was no accident. The shattered moons of Dravok floated in ruins, debris fields dense with jagged stone and broken satellites. Navigation was dangerous, visibility fractured. But to Elias Kale, it was perfect. Against overwhelming numbers, terrain was his ally. The rebellion fleet assembled from dozens of species, patched hulls and stolen tech bound together by desperation. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Elias studied the star map. His fleet was smaller, weaker, and yet every alien eye on the deck looked to him as if he were unbreakable. He knew the truth. He was terrified. But fear sharpened him. Fear had kept humanity alive when logic said they should be dust. He turned to his crew. "This isn't just a battle. It's a message. If we fall, they'll tell the galaxy resistance is hopeless. If we stand, they'll know the Empire can bleed." The fleet surged forward. Engines screamed, weapons charged, and in the darkness of Dravok, two storms collided. The first exchange was thunder. Zareth dreadnoughts unleashed torrents of plasma that burned through asteroids, vaporizing rock into glowing clouds. Rebellion ships darted between the debris, firing in sudden bursts before vanishing again. Fighters clashed like swarms of metallic insects, trails of fire carving lines through the void. Elias commanded with precision. "Squadron 3, draw them into the minefield. Sirath carriers, release the drones." His voice carried calm authority, even as the deck shook under enemy fire. His allies obeyed without question, weaving impossible maneuvers in ships that should have fallen apart weeks ago. Every victory was paid in blood. A Karen warship rammed a Zareth cruiser head-on, detonating in a flare that took both to the grave. Sirath fighters exploded in silent blossoms, their pilots chirping final cries before impact. The rebellion fought like beings who had nothing left to lose. But the Empire pressed harder. For every dreadnought scarred, 5 rebel vessels burned. The Iron Resolve was struck, alarms screaming as fire tore through its hull. Yet Elias stood firm, his eyes locked on the largest silhouette in the distance, the Bloodfang. "Bring us to her," he ordered. The flagship groaned under the strain, engines pushing beyond safety. Around them, the rebellion faltered. But Elias knew what had to be done. Hope would not survive unless he struck at the head. The Bloodfang plowed through the battlefield like a beast, smashing aside asteroids, firing salvos that reduced entire wings of fighters to ash. When the Iron Resolve drew close, Velara's voice boomed across open comms. "Human, you should have stayed forgotten. Today I bury your kind again." Elias answered without hesitation. "Humans don't bury easy. You'll learn that the hard way." The two ships collided in a brutal docking maneuver, hulls grinding together as boarding clamps snapped. The impact sent both crews reeling. Then came silence, broken by the hiss of cutting torches as Zareth warriors forced entry. But Elias was already waiting. He led his boarding party with blade in hand, charging into the maelstrom. Plasma bolts ripped through corridors, steel rang against claws, bodies fell. He cut his way forward with relentless determination, each strike carrying the weight of extinct ancestors behind him. At the heart of the ship, the doors to the command deck burst open. Velara stood waiting, her presence towering, her armor scorched but unbowed. She dismissed her guards with a gesture. This was no battle of armies now. This was personal. Elias stepped into the chamber, chest heaving, blade slick with blood. "It ends with us," he said. Velara drew her war spear, its edges humming with plasma. "Then come, ghost of Earth, let me end you twice." They clashed. Steel screamed against energy, sparks painting the walls. She struck with raw power, each blow a thunderclap, but Elias dodged, countered, using agility and precision. He was small, but every strike he made was aimed at weakness. Joints, seams, vulnerable flesh. The duel tore the command deck apart. Consoles exploded, fire raged, and outside the windows, fleets still battled, unaware their leaders fought at arm's length. Every swing, every block, every gasp of pain echoed like history being rewritten. Velara's roar shook the chamber. Elias's defiance burned brighter. Two warriors from species that should never have crossed blades now fought for the fate of countless worlds, and neither would yield. The command deck shuddered as the duel raged. Fire belched from ruptured conduits, casting Elias Kale and War Chief Velara in shifting shadows. Sparks rained like falling stars as steel screamed under their weapons. Elias's arms trembled with exhaustion, every muscle torn from the weight of survival. But his eyes burned brighter than ever, defiance giving him strength where flesh faltered. Across from him, Velara towered, blood streaking her armor, golden eyes glowing like molten suns. She had fought countless enemies in her lifetime, but never had she felt a fight like this, their blades locked again. She forced him down, snarling, "You are only one man! What can one man do against an empire?" Elias pushed back, teeth gritted, blood dripping from his mouth. "One man can light a fire that never dies." With a roar, he twisted, driving, his blade into a seam in her armor. The point pierced deep, sizzling against flesh. Velara staggered, choking on pain. But her counterstrike was savage. Her claws raked across his chest, tearing into bone. Both fell to their knees, wounded, their breaths ragged. Outside, the battle reached its breaking point. The rebellion's fleet, battered and burning, had one last card. Hidden aboard their smallest ships were stolen fuel cell cores, unstable bombs smuggled into the heart of the fight. At Elias's signal, they detonated. The void erupted in silent fury. Half the Zareth armada went up in sheets of white flame. Shockwaves rippled through the debris fields, tearing dreadnoughts apart like toys. The rebellion's fleet screamed, in triumph, even as they burned alongside their enemies. On the Bloodfang, the explosion rocked the hull. Consoles burst, fire spread, alarms howled. Velara slumped against the wall, bleeding heavily, watching her empire's strength unravel through the shattered viewport. She turned her gaze back to Elias. You should not exist. I erased you." Elias's voice was faint but steady. "Yet here I stand, and now you'll remember us. Forever." Blood bubbled in his throat. His body was broken, his breath shallow, but his spirit would not bend. He pressed a control shard into his palm, one he had ripped from the ship's systems during the fight. Its codes, ancient human overrides buried in his bloodline, ignited the Bloodfang's reactors. He leaned close, whispering so only she could hear. "Your empire dies today." The shard pulsed once. Warning klaxons blared. Deep in the dreadnought's core, fire bloomed uncontrollably. Velara's warriors stormed into the chamber, but froze when they saw their war chief on the ground and the human beside her. Some reached for weapons, but her raised hand stopped them. For the first time in her life, Velara's voice was not command, but disbelief. "This is humanity," she rasped. Elias's lips curved into a faint smile. "No, this is freedom." The Bloodfang erupted. The explosion ripped through, the dreadnought cracking its armored spine in two. The blast consumed everything. Bridge, warriors, human, war chief. The shockwave tore across the battlefield, scattering wreckage into the void. When the light faded, the largest ship of the Zareth Empire was gone. Silence followed. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then the rebellion fleet, scarred and broken but still alive, roared across open channels. Alien voices of a dozen species cried out Kael's name, their victory bought with his sacrifice. The Empire's fleets, shattered and leaderless, faltered. What had once seemed invincible was bleeding, limping back to its strongholds. Word spread faster than ships could travel. A human destroyed the war chief. Entire systems rose in revolt. Enslaved populations turned on their overseers. The Zareth grip cracked, and with every uprising, the legend of Elias Kael grew. War Chief Velara did not die. She was pulled from the wreckage by her surviving warriors, her body broken, her empire humbled. Scars marked her for life, a reminder of the duel that had undone centuries of conquest. And though she told herself humans were weak, frail, doomed, she could not erase the memory of Elias's eyes, burning with impossible fire even as death claimed him. Years passed, then decades. Across the galaxy, statues of Elias Kael were built not in marble or steel, but in the stories people told. Parents whispered his defiance to children. Soldiers carved his name into blades. Slaves muttered it like prayer before rising against their masters. He had not lived to see victory, but his sacrifice ignited a chain reaction no empire could contain. He became more than human. He became symbol. And in the dark halls of the once mighty Zareth, whispers haunted the warriors who had followed Velara. Offered as a gift to the war chief, he became the spark that burned an empire. The throne chamber of the Zareth Empire was built to intimidate. It wasn't a hall for politics or debate, but a monument of terror. Polished obsidian steel formed the walls, etched with battle scenes showing Zareth warriors conquering lesser races. The floor was a mirror-black surface reflecting the banners overhead, red cloth marked with jagged glyphs of domination. Even the air tasted heavy, metallic, as if it remembered blood spilled centuries ago. At the far end sat the throne, a jagged construct of bone and metal fused together from the ruins of worlds the Empire had destroyed. Upon it rested War Chief, Velara, towering above her warriors, armor glinting like forged shadow. She was a predator, broad-shouldered, her eyes glowing gold like molten suns, her voice a weapon as sharp as any blade. To the Zareth, she was more than a leader. She was the conqueror of Earth itself, the butcher of a species erased 2 centuries ago. Her presence silenced even her most battle-hardened generals. When the chamber doors groaned open, every head turned. The returning war band entered in formation, armor scarred from raids. At their center, bound in chains of energy, staggered a prisoner. Smaller than the Zareth, bare skin bruised and bloodied, yet his posture was upright. His wrists trembled from the weight of the shackles, but his chin was raised, jaw set. The gathered crowd leaned forward, whispers slithering through the chamber. One of the generals, voice thick with pride, announced, "My war chief, we bring you a rare prize, a creature thought extinct, said to be a human." A murmur rippled through the hall, disbelief mixing with curiosity. Some laughed, others hissed. Humans were ghosts, children's tales told to scare young recruits. The Empire had written them out of history books, branding them weak, doomed, easily crushed. But the prisoner stood there, alive, breathing, defiant. Velara rose from her throne, every movement radiating controlled fury. The chamber fell silent as her boots clanged against the steel floor. She towered over the prisoner, her shadow swallowing him. Slowly, she lifted his chin with a clawed hand, her golden eyes locked on his blue ones. In that moment, she saw no fear, no begging, just fire. Her voice, low but trembling with shock, cut through the hall. "Impossible! I destroyed the last of your kind 200 years ago." The prisoner's lips curled into a faint smile, despite blood staining his mouth. His voice was steady, sharp as a blade hidden in plain sight. "Then you failed." The hall erupted into chaos. Generals snarled, soldiers growled, some laughed at the audacity. Yet beneath it all, unease crept into their voices. If this was true, if humans had survived, it meant the Empire's greatest claim, their crowning victory, was a lie. Velara stepped back, struggling to contain the storm inside her. She remembered Earth's burning skies, oceans turned black, cities reduced to ash. She remembered leading fleets of fire that cracked continents apart. She had felt the triumph of extinction, the certainty of victory over a race too stubborn to surrender. She had told herself humanity was gone forever, and now here one stood, chained, yet unbroken. Her claws tightened against her gauntlets. Rage battled disbelief. What trick is this? Some clone? A beast dressed in human skin? The prisoner only smirked. "You know the truth when you see it." That confidence unsettled her more than any blade. Around them, soldiers shifted uneasily. Even hardened killers felt something shift in the room, a weight pressing down, an omen. Velara forced herself to regain composure, turning to her generals. "Take him to the vaults. Strip him. Interrogate him. If he is human, I will know. And if he lies, his death will be slow." The chains pulled tight as guards dragged the prisoner toward the shadows of the chamber. Yet even as he was taken, his gaze never wavered from Velara's. Those blue eyes burned into her mind, unsettling in a way no enemy had ever managed. They were the eyes of a creature that had lost everything, yet still refused to bow. That night, long after the throne room emptied, Velara sat alone, armored fists clenched. For the first time in 2 centuries, doubt gnawed at her. Could it be true? Could the ghosts of humanity still walk the stars? She had slaughtered them. She had ended their world. She was certain, and yet she couldn't erase the words echoing in her skull, "Then you failed." The cell was carved into the belly of the flagship, a cage of humming energy walls. Most prisoners collapsed within hours, the constant vibration eating at their sanity. But the human did not. He sat cross-legged, steady as stone, his blue eyes watching every flicker of light as though the ship itself were a puzzle waiting to be solved. His name was Captain Elias Kale. To the Zareth, he was just another prisoner, but in truth he carried something priceless: knowledge. His bloodline traced directly back to the survivors of the Terran Defense Fleet, those who had fought until Earth itself cracked. The last captains of humanity had embedded war codes in their own DNA, a failsafe, buried in generations, waiting for someone desperate and bold enough to awaken them. Elias knew why he had let himself be taken. Alone, he was one man. Within the heart of the Zareth war machine, he was a knife pressed to their throat. The guards mocked him daily, pressing against the energy field with cruel grins. "Weak creature, soft bones, small lungs. How did your kind ever build ships?" they sneered. Elias never answered their insults. He studied them instead, their gait, their habits, their arrogance. Patience was his weapon, and his silence unnerved them. Meanwhile, War Chief Velara was restless. She had interrogated countless enemies, crushed rebellions with her claws, broken entire species until their spirits bled dry. But this prisoner haunted her thoughts. His calm was unnatural. His defiance, even more so. She told herself it was. Bravado, yet deep in her chest, old instincts stirred. The memory of humans who had once bled her fleets dry, fighting long after defeat was certain. Finally, she confronted him directly. She entered the cell with 2 guards, her towering frame, filling the space like a living storm. Her voice was low, controlled, every syllable edged with danger. "Tell me how you live. Your kind is gone." "I ended you." Elias looked up, his gaze unflinching. "No, you ended billions, but you didn't end us. You didn't understand humans. You thought war was about killing bodies. For us, war is about will." Her claws flexed. Will does not stop plasma fire. Will does not shield worlds from annihilation. He tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And yet, here I am. Proof your victory wasn't complete. Proof you left something unfinished." Her golden eyes narrowed. She hated the weight in his words. They struck deeper than any blade. For the Zareth, history was carved in certainty. The humans were erased, their defiance a tale of warning. But here was contradiction breathing in front of her. "Do you know what I am?" she asked finally, her voice like thunder in the cage. "I am the slayer of your earth. I watched your oceans boil. I saw your cities fall into fire. I remember your fleets breaking apart like glass." Elias didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but sharper than her roars. "Good. Remember it. Remember every scream, every burning city. Because one day when your empire burns, you'll understand what we felt." For the first time in decades, War Chief Velara was struck silent. His words cut through her armor, reminding her of a truth she had buried, that humans never begged. Even at the end, they had fought. Even dying, they had taken Zareth dreadnoughts with them into the void. She turned sharply and left, her claws clanging against her gauntlets, but the unease followed her like a shadow. Back in the cell, Elias exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He had planted the seed. Doubt was more dangerous than any weapon, and he had seen it flicker in her eyes. But there was no time to waste. His escape was not just about survival, it was about ignition. He had learned the Empire's fleets moved like a web, each ship connected through pulse relays. With the codes buried in his blood, he could hijack those signals. He could bring chaos to their order. And when chaos bloomed, the enslaved species of the galaxy would rise. Elias closed his eyes, replaying the old words his ancestors had passed down, whispered in secret on Haven 7. "We are the last breath of Earth. We are the fire they cannot kill. We wait in silence until the stars call us to strike." That time had come. He flexed his hands against the cuffs, feeling the faint hum of the energy restraints. Soon, very soon, the Empire would learn what it meant to leave even a single human alive. And War Chief Velara, the so-called destroyer of his people, would come to understand the one truth her empire had never grasped. The Zareth flagship was a city of steel drifting through endless night, its corridors patrolled by armored warriors who trusted in fear to keep prisoners silent. But fear did not work on Elias Kyle. He had spent weeks studying the routines, memorizing every shift change, every power fluctuation, every careless step the guards made when they thought no one watched. Tonight, the ship made its regular energy cycle, a brief dip in the field generators as the core rebalanced power across the decks. To most, it was imperceptible. To Elias, it was opportunity. He sat shackled in the cell, eyes half closed, body still. When the lights flickered for less than a heartbeat, he moved. With a twist of his wrist, he dislocated his thumb, letting the cuff slip just enough to wedge a broken fragment of metal he had hidden under his tongue. He had cut it from his food tray days ago, filed it sharp against the wall, and waited. Sparks leapt as he jammed the shard into the restraint's lock. The cuffs spasmed, then snapped open. For the first time since capture, his hands were free. Energy wall hummed, daring him to touch it. He didn't. Instead, he pressed his palm to the floor. The vibration had a rhythm, a pulse. He timed it with the cycle, waited until the field stuttered, then plunged the shard into the emitter panel. It shorted in a blinding flash, collapsing the barrier. The alarm shrieked instantly. Boots thundered down the corridor. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged for the first guard who appeared, slamming him into the wall. A clawed fist swung. He ducked. Under it, driving the shard into the alien's throat. Hot blood sprayed, painting the walls. The guard collapsed, twitching. The second came roaring, plasma spear raised. Elias seized the fallen alien's sidearm and fired. The blast cracked through armor, dropping the warrior before he could shout. Adrenaline burned through him, but Elias knew the alarm was spreading. He had seconds before the entire ship descended. He sprinted through the maze of corridors, ducking into shadows, weaving between bulkheads. His mind worked faster than fear, calculating paths, memorizing schematics he had glimpsed when dragged through the ship. More guards appeared, their heavy steps shaking the deck. Elias fired on the move, plasma bolts searing past him. He dove through a hatchway, rolled, and stabbed a guard in the joint where armor was weakest. Every strike was fast, brutal, efficient. He couldn't match their size or strength, but speed and precision were his weapons. Soon the hangar loomed ahead. The chamber was vast, filled with rows of starfighters and carriers suspended on magnetic clamps. Technicians shouted, scrambling to seal the bays as alarms roared. Elias sprinted for the nearest fighter. Plasma bolts hissed around him. He ducked, leapt onto the craft's wing, and slammed his fist into the cockpit control. Glass shattered under his strike. He hauled himself in, bleeding and breathless, fingers flying across alien controls. The fighter roared to life, its engines screaming awake. But before he could launch, the doors at the far end burst open. War Chief Velara entered. Her presence silenced the chamber. Warriors parted as she strode forward, her armor glowing under the hangar lights. She did not shout. She did not need to. Her eyes alone were enough to freeze lesser beings. Elias met her gaze through the cracked canopy. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was heavier than words. Then Velara raised her hand. "Crush him!" The hangar erupted in chaos. Soldiers charged, plasma fire lighting the air. Elias pulled the throttle. The fighter lurched, engines howling. He slammed the craft into motion, skimming low across the deck. Sparks showered as he clipped scaffolding, knocking warriors aside like dolls. The bay shields shimmered ahead, the barrier that kept vacuum at bay. With a roar, Elias fired the fighter's cannons, tearing open the shield emitters. The energy field collapsed in a violent rush of air. The hangar screamed as atmosphere vented into the void. Elias gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle to maximum. The fighter shot forward, pulled into the black of space. Behind him, alarms wailed, warriors clung to railings, and Velara stood unflinching against the hurricane of wind, her golden eyes locked on his retreating ship. Through the comms, her voice reached him, cold as iron. "You'll be hunted across galaxies." Elias allowed himself a thin grin, blood dripping from his lips. "Good," he whispered. "Let them come." Then he was gone, a lone human in a stolen fighter, vanishing into the star-strewn dark. The legend had begun. The stolen Zareth fighter was never meant for long voyages, but Elias Kale pushed it across systems with raw willpower. He scavenged fuel from abandoned stations, rewired controls with his own bloodied hands, and slept in snatches, one eye always open. The galaxy was vast, and every patrol searched for him. But in the shadows of forgotten space, he found something the Empire had not counted on, others who had waited for someone to rise. It began with whispers. Refugees, smugglers, enslaved miners, each heard the rumor. A human lived. At first, it was dismissed as drunken talk, but then raiding convoys vanished, prison ships were liberated, and weapons once thought unreachable appeared in the hands of rebels. The signature of the stolen fighter marked each strike, proof that the myth was real. Elias did not seek followers, but they came anyway. The first were the Sirath, insectoid workers who had been chained to Empire mines for generations. When Elias freed a transport carrying hundreds of them, they knelt, clicking their mandibles in unison, swearing loyalty. "You burn brighter than the suns," their leader said. "Let us burn with you." Next were the Karen, scaled hunters forced to serve as gladiators. Elias armed them, teaching tactics he'd learned from his ancestors' old war logs. Their ferocity became a spearhead for his growing fleet. Others followed. Outcasts, smugglers, deserters, species beaten into silence, who now found courage in the sight of one human standing unbroken. They built their fleet from scraps, patched hulls, stolen weapons, vessels stripped from fallen patrols. What should have been chaos turned into an engine of defiance because Elias had what no one else did: strategy. He fought not to win battles outright, but to strike where the Empire was weakest, to show the galaxy that the Zareth were not untouchable. Every raid was chosen with precision. Supply lines collapsed. Fuel depots erupted in fire. Prison colonies opened their gates. Each victory was a spark, and those sparks spread into wildfire. On the bridge of his makeshift flagship, a corvette renamed Iron Resolve, Elias stood before his gathered allies. The Sirath clicked in the shadows, the Karen sharpened their blades, and dozens of other species watched him with hungry eyes. They expected orders. They expected leadership. He gave them something more. "We are more than bodies," he said, his voice carrying through static-choked comms to every ship. "We are not numbers for their chains. We are the will that rises when crushed. They told you humanity was gone, erased from the stars. But humanity lives in every one of you who refuses to kneel." A roar answered him, not of one species but many, united in fury. The Zareth did not ignore him for long. Entire fleets were dispatched to hunt this phantom rebellion. Velara herself studied the reports, and every time she saw the human's name attached to another raid, a heat burned inside her that was not simple rage. It was something more dangerous: uncertainty. Kale answered their pressure with audacity. He led his ragtag forces into asteroid belts where dreadnoughts could not maneuver. He feigned retreats, drawing pursuers into traps that left hulks of Zareth ships drifting lifeless. He sacrificed what he had to in order to strike blows that echoed far beyond the battlefields. Still, the cost was brutal. For every prison ship freed, dozens of allies died. For every supply convoy captured, worlds still burned under Zareth claws. Elias carried those losses on his shoulders. In the quiet moments between battles, he stared out at the stars, whispering apologies to ghosts of his fallen kin and promises to the ones who followed him now. But there was no turning back. The galaxy was watching. Species who had never dared to rise were now lifting blades, emboldened by the impossible, by a human walking the stars again. The Empire tried to smother the fire with propaganda. "The human is a lie," their broadcasts declared. A trick, a phantom invented to stir cowards. Yet footage of Elias leading strikes kept spreading. Stories traveled faster than patrols. Parents told their children at night, "The fire-bearer fights for us." Soon, entire slave camps rioted without his presence, carrying his name like a banner. On the Iron Resolve, Elias looked at the growing fleet and felt the weight of history. He was not simply a survivor anymore. He was a symbol, and symbols could not falter. He clenched his fists as another report came in, a system rising in open defiance. The Zareth Empire was no longer invincible. The spark had been lit.